Good afternoon. It's Sunday, January 10th. I'm back in the Reading Nook with one last parcel to unbox today. It's fairly cold and chilly out, but it's not as icy as it has been. And nevertheless, I come equipped with a nice hot cup of tea. So, let's get to opening of this parcel. So here we are, fairly sturdy, but we shall find out what this is. Okay, this is Scarred for Life, Volume 2, television in the 1980s. Now, a couple of years ago, the authors published a book called Scarred for Life, which looked at television and culture in the 1970s, and essentially how dark it was. So, whether it was the infamous information broadcasts designed to warn children of dangers in certain areas, so playing near pools of water, or on farms, which showed children really being put peril and the dangers. And if you watch them, they look back and they are quite scary, and they were scary back in the day, because I'm old enough to remember them. But also looked at sort of like a lot of the wider culture, not just television and film, but games and the like, and so on. Scarred for Life Volume 2 goes into the 1980s. First one did the 1970s. So if you have a look, we have kids shows, science fiction, so that's Blake 7, the AIDS crisis, drugs, what's we've got here? Horror and adverts essentially black and white, and throughout fairly dense text. So the character, basically the first thing the character looks like is Nosy Bonk. It's not something I necessarily remember, but I remember vaguely seeing the character, but I didn't watch that. But there's going to be lots in here that is familiar. Basically dealing with television, the Chucky trilogy, which I do remember, and the tripods. I can remember watching that because I was a fan of the books, which I read about the same, but read before the TV series was published, because my school library had them. I remember my sister wouldn't watch this because she was scared of it. So you've got a piece about that. Knights of God, which came up recently as a top conversation. Does anyone remember that? Yes, I do remember it from the mid-80s. Strange little series that was done on ITV, and that piece of essentially dystopian fiction that sort of like mixed in elements of the Arthurian legend, and then classically we go on to Nightmare. Now Nightmare was a game show where essentially three children would basically turn up, would basically stand against a basically blue screen background, and they would explore it, helped by a guide tree. Let's have a look. A tree guard, and the thing is about it is that essentially it plugged into the aspect, the thing back then of the fighting fantasy solo adventure books, but you could see it on TV. And by time, and this is sort of like 1987, so 1994, so I was in my early 20s then. But I was watching it because it was, it was fantasy, and it did sort of like the nearest thing you could see to I would say, Dungeons and Dragons on television. And the last few years it's come back in popularity because there's a team of comedians who literally have been presenting it as a stage show, and it's really fun to watch. And they do perform at UK Games Expo. So beyond television, let's have a look. Basically keep going. Science fiction, so there's Blake 7, Day of the Triffids, which is a nice little well-regarded adaptation from the very early 80s. Looks at let's have a look. Which was Alien Invasion series from 1984, broadcast at the time of the Los Angeles Olympics, and that was again very popular. So lots of television in there. Quite a lot of television actually, because there was a lot of television back then. I mean, there is a lot of television, but there was a lot more than you think. So we've gone to movies. I'm just trying to think what else is in here. We've got Scared by Public Information films. So yeah, basically this really does focus heavily on the television, and there's something else from. So there's an such section in here that deals with doll dramas. Now, one of the interesting things about, I say interesting things, looking back on it, is during the 1980s, certainly the early 80s, there was a huge rise of unemployment to roughly about 3 million people, and at the same time, there was the attitude of the government was not always helpful. It was always seen as it was their fault, and it necessarily wasn't. People constantly being put out of work, there not being enough jobs, and so on. And there was a very much a change in the culture and working culture at the time. If you have any interest in television of the period, then this is going to be a really interesting book to delve into. So you had these as well. Basically, Superman was used at the time as basically a voice for anti-smoking campaigns, and so on. And then basically there's a whole list of essentially public information films in the 1980s. Again, not necessarily quite as scary, but still, scary enough. So there is an awful lot to dig into in this book, lots to read. Whether dealing with the nanny state, stranger danger, which is a big it's always been a sort of big campaign since the 80s. I certainly remember my daughter basically being taught stranger danger during the 1990s, and one for basically drink and drive campaigns. So you go back basically during the period before you could drink and drive, and yes, you could be prosecuted for it, but essentially the limit on drink and driving was quite high, now to the point, and there was a big campaign to reduce the deaths on the road through drinking and driving, and ultimately that worked. And again, the anti-drug campaigns in there, heroin screws you up. That was something when I was at school, came up basically 1980 or so. I can remember basically being shown films about that. So Other things like Your House is Deadly, like chip pan fires. Yep, remember that one. Okay, so there's less upon, I think, on the games. This primarily focuses on television and film of the 80s, but that's Scarred for Life Volume 2. If so, basically this will appeal to this nostalgia market. I don't know, there's a lot of people out there who are really big fans of period television, and certainly genre television of the period. So I thoroughly recommend reading this. Basically, a nice reference work, whether or not just to read or do something more with it. So in the meantime, thank you very much for watching another unboxing in the Nook. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button. If you've got a comment you would like to make, or feedback, please do. I do look at them, and of course, please take the time to subscribe if you want to hear more about further unboxings in the Nook as they are uploaded. Bye for now.